The scripture lesson this morning is drawn from Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31, and it can be found in your pew Bibles on page 851. I will begin, and we will alternate verses and say the last verse together. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day.
And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores,
who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores.
The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried.
In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side.
He called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames.
But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony.
Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us.
He said, Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house.
For I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment.
Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them.
He said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent.
Together, he said to him, If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. May God bless to us this reading of his scripture.
A 23-year-old liberated lady wrote one of those Dear Abby letters. And her case is involved with she being on the pill for 2 years and was complaining about the expense. She wants her boyfriend to share half of the cost, but she doesn't know him well enough to discuss money with him. Money's a tough problem, and stewardship season in the church. And people get squeamish when the preacher talks about money. I know. Done it for 50 years. Well, I'm going to preach about money today without asking for any. Jesus did that a lot. The topic of money was on his mind more than just about anything. Only Luke tells this story about a rich man who was apathetic toward those who were less fortunate. Even the dogs had more compassion. The man, he wasn't evil, nor was he harshly scolded. Tradition says his name is Dives. It dates back to the 14th century Latin term that means rich man. His sin was what he could have done but didn't do. He didn't abuse his power. He just didn't use his power for anything other than himself. He didn't mistreat the beggar. He just didn't care about his plight. That really bugs Jesus. It's an intense story because almost everybody in it is dead. That'll get your attention. The 5 brothers, though, they're still alive, but won't be convinced even if somebody raises from the dead. That's the argument. Now, this is not a story about blessed are the poor, the victim stuff that we hear a lot of, so that if you're wretched on earth, then you get payback in the afterlife. No, Luke's more wary of the risk of riches, the risk of having lots of things, lots of stuff, because it lulls us into thinking that we are responsible for what we have. We earned it. We are entitled to it. It belongs to us, and if we can't get it from one way or another, we'll get it from somebody else. For those of us who are blessed with more than we need, most of us, because we invested wisely, that's a good thing. We have more than we need because we invested wisely. It falls to us to spend it generously. And what better way could we spend our income than to give to this church? And the good that this church does in this world. I can't think of a better way. To underline how God expects us to use our blessings, not just to have them, but to use them for good, Jesus tells this terrible tale about oozing sores and slobbering dogs and fiery torment and no going back. Did you get that? There's a finality involved in this. The only thing the man feels badly about is where he landed after he died. I don't blame him. I'd feel bad about that too. Well, the beggar's place was a distance, it says, from the wealthy man, which was how he preferred it to be, the distance. He preferred that. And that way he didn't have to deal with him. That comes from being intimate with people. We have to have a distance, a proper distance, so we don't have to deal with them. The segregation didn't bother the rich man at all. But now that they've swapped places, Lazarus does something, and he has something that Dives wants. What is it? A simple glass of water. 2 men, as different as heaven and hell, separated only by a gate outside the rich man's mansion, and mercifully the poor man dies. No surprises are here. He's already half dead when the story started, but now is where the tale really picks up steam after he dies. First century theology allowed for wrongs to be righted after death or in the afterlife. That's where I guess we get the idea of purgatory, for our Catholic friends are big on that. So in this story, Lazarus is transported by the angels to the bosom of Abraham. Matt, we should have sung Rock of My Soul today. Although what we did was very good. Wasn't that great? Rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham. That's where the angels took him. When Dives dies, there's no ride on angels' wings for him. But he's still, did you notice, he's still in character after he died, trying to maintain his previous status from his wealth. Hey, Father Abraham, send that water boy over here. Give me a drink. I'm about to thirst, die of thirst. Even on the other side of the grave, Dives subordinated Lazarus like a shoeshine boy. But Abraham won't be moved. He's got a backbone, but it's not a crowbar. He won't be pushed around by somebody on the other side of the gulf. The gate prevented a poor man from life's necessities. And at one time, the gate could have been opened. But now, it's too late. It's become an inaccessible abyss. So Abraham says, son, remember? Remember how you had all the good things in life? Well, the chickens have come home to roost. At least send him back to alert my brothers what's in store for them if they don't wise up. Sorry, Abraham says. Sorry, no. They have Moses. They have the prophets. That was the Bible in that day. They have the Bible. They have the scriptures. That's all they need. Just the Bible, David said. Is that all you got? Just the Bible? But boy, if somebody got up out of the grave, man, started walking around, that'll get their attention. They'll listen to that. And Father Abraham sticks to his guns. If they won't listen to the Bible, neither will they be convinced, even if somebody rises from the dead. So here they are in the afterlife having a theological spat about how faith is generated. Abraham says the Bible will do it. The Bible is sufficient. All they need, they already have. And Dives doesn't think the Bible will cut the mustard. But a resurrection will. Or bring in a beauty queen to preach from the rooftop someplace, or Elvis's brother-in-law, or a midget walking down the aisle with a yo-yo. That'll do it. That's what a lot of churches try. Or that weirdo who pops up every year at the Super Bowl. You know that guy with the rainbow-colored afro and he shakes his head wearing a John 3:16 t-shirt? You know that guy? Somebody needs to give him a Yankee cap. Sorry, folks. A Yankee cap that says Luke 23:34. Now, who can tell me what Luke 23:34 says? I knew it. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Sensationalism, that'll do it. The Bible won't cut it, but a resurrection, man, that'll get her done. But we don't need that, Abraham says. We have the Bible. We have Easter. And yet, the vast majority today are still content to provide only for themselves. There's so much of that. So little of y'all. What is it that allows someone to be in our direct line of sight and still never see them? That's what this guy did. Money can do that. It's understandable why most folks stay away from church, especially at stewardship time. Because church is the only place I know of where we contemplate how our way of life now can make all the difference in this world and the next. The only place I know of that does that. No wonder people stay away from church. Dr. Fosdick preached once about a man in New York who wanted to go to Detroit. And that's fine, but after he bought the ticket, he got on the wrong bus and wound up in Cleveland. Oops. To get to where you want to go, You got to get on the bus that'll take you there. Is this not the point of Jesus' story? Are you living now the way you hope to wind up someday? Might end up in Cleveland someplace. God help us. Now, this is a parable. Let's be clear about this. It's not a prediction. It's a story. That means it's not to be taken literally, but it is terribly true. Things can be true and not literal. God gives us the freedom to live our lives for good or ill. And the best thing about it yet for us is it ain't over yet. It's too late for Ivins. He can't get from here to there. And there's no going back from hell to warn others about what's to come. But Jesus sneaked it out on the third day to give us time to make our own course corrections. You better not play around with this stuff. That's what I hear from this story. The first thing Jesus did in the Gospel of Luke on Easter night was to companion two downcast disciples walking along the road to a place called Emmaus. And then the scripture says, beginning with Moses and the prophets. Wink, wink. Beginning with Moses and the prophets, here they are again with the scriptures. He interpreted to them the scriptures, the Bible. They had the scriptures. That is enough, says Abraham. The Bible is all we need. But they didn't know it was Jesus. What is it that blinds us to somebody directly in our line of sight? Disappointment? Boy, disappointment can do that. We had hoped, they said. We had hoped he was the one to redeem Israel. But Jesus had bigger things in mind than Israel. The Bible's all we need. Disappointment can blind us to things right in front of us. And people go bonkers over an election that didn't go their way, or a ball game that they lost the night before. That's things that cause us to not see what we should see. But among these two on the road was what Ivins asked for. One who rose from the dead, back alive, reviving their hopes that they had for Israel's redemption, which they thought they had lost. We had hoped he was the one, but he's not. The table can do that. It can renew our hopes as we're gathered around the table. Now, there's no way to sanitize how this story ends. Briefly put, Ivins is hot and Lazarus is not. Isn't that it? God knows the rich can be as imprisoned by their wealth as the poor are by their poverty. But God would rather we failed at loving imperfectly than to succeed and attempt nothing courageous out of our success. Like that one talent man, Matthew 25, that one talent man in the Gospel of Matthew who hid his gift in the ground because he was a wuss. Church is where we learn not to be afraid to risk the talents we have been given by God. What better place can you do that than right here? My soul. And stewardship season lies at the root of all of this, because church offers us a way to share our time, to share our talents, and yes, our money with something bigger than ourselves. I think there's something in the heart of every person that wants to do that. The hard part is getting them to do it. You got to change the wanter. How did you, dang, that'd make a preacher cuss. I'm going to get that thing before I quit. Interrupt me. Well, church is where we still preach from Moses and the prophets. So I'm with Father Abraham in this debate. If the Bible is good enough to live by, it's good enough for us to die with, because it's all we have to bring us face to face with God is this book. That's all we have in my book. Maybe you're aware that the mouth of the mighty Mississippi River is way up north in Minnesota someplace, where there's no more than a trickle in a tiny branch. They have a state park there called Itasca State Park, and they don't have a bridge at that point because it can easily be crossed by walking on pebbles at that point. Fascinating. But try that in Baton Rouge, and you'll go no place but down, because the river is too deep and too wide to cross on foot. Humble beginnings, but massive endings. Now, I know y'all. I've been living among you, and I know y'all. I'm preaching to the choir here. Not a one of you today would be caught dead eating a full-course meal in front of a starving person without sharing some of what you have. That's what you do, and you do it well. But some things have to be done while you can. The good news is there's still time for us to learn to live together before we're fit to live with.